السلام عليكم ورحمة الله وبركاته. This is the second lecture of anatomy in human body module about bone, cartilage and joints part 1 about bone and cartilage. And Professor Dr. Mona Mohammed Zuhair will be with you. This is the resources and reference textbook clinical anatomy by region, introduction about bone and cartilage, and videos about structure of bone and the human skeletal system. Session ILOs. List the functions of bone. Identify the forms and shapes of bone. List the regional classification of bone. Identify the surface marking of bone and define bone marrow and periosteum with their functions. Mention the types of ossification, development of bone. Define the types of cartilages in the human body. Now, what are the functions of the human skeleton, of bones in the human skeleton? Number 1, protective function is skull will protect the brain. Vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Sternum and ribs protect the thoracic viscera. You can see here the skull protects the brain. Vertebral column protects the spinal cord. Sternum and ribs protect the thoracic viscera as heart and lungs. Number 2, it acts as lever action, as long bones of the limb. The arrangement of the bones in the limb act as lever. lever وكأنه عمل الروافع. As this arrangement will help to produce variety of movements by minimum contraction of the muscles. Number 3, the bone is a storage for calcium salts till the time of need. Number 4, it contains blood forming bone marrow. Inside the long bone there is a cavity for bone marrow which will form the blood, and also in the cancellous bone as vertebrae contain also a bone marrow. Here protection, skull and vertebral column. Here lever action. Here calcium storage and formation of blood by bone marrow. The forms or structure of the bone. Okay, we have two types of forms of bone in the human body. Number 1, compact bone. Usually on the surface of any bone I can see the bone solid mass called compact bone. Number 2, cancellous or spongy bone. The interior containing bone like sponge, like the مثل sphinx, consists of branching network of trabeculae or spicules of bone which resist stress. Regional classification of bones. If you look to the skeleton, you can see skeleton is divided into axial skeleton, the part of the skeleton in the midline as skull, and appendicular skeleton for the limbs. The axial skeleton formed of skull, vertebral column, and ribs and sternum. And the appendicular skeleton means skeleton of the appendages, means skeleton of limbs, upper limb and lower limb. Okay, in this classification, we can see in the upper limb the shoulder girdle, clavicle, scapula, the arm humerus, the forearm, radius and the ulna, and then carpal, metacarpal, and phalanges. In the lower limb, there is pelvic girdle formed of hip bone, and then thigh bone is the femur, and then the patella or kneecap, and tibia and fibula, leg bone, and then tarsal, metatarsal, and phalanges. And you will study these bones in detail in the lab. Now let us see classification according to the shapes of bone. Classification according, if you look to the shape of any bone, you can see the bone may be long, may be short, may be flat, may be irregular, may be sesamoid. Now let us take one by one in detail. Long bone. If you look to the long bone, what is the structure or character of long bone? I can see it is found in limbs as humerus, femur, okay, and they have tubular shaft. What is the meaning of tubular? It means it is like the tube. From inside, it is a hollow. Okay, tubular shaft called diaphysis, and two ends called epiphyses. Epiphysis above, epiphysis below, and the tubular shaft or diaphysis. Diaphysis is separated from epiphysis by epiphyseal plate. Okay, look here. This plate of cartilage called epiphyseal line or epiphyseal plate, which is responsible for growth, separating epiphysis from diaphysis. Metaphysis. What is metaphysis? It is the part of diaphysis just nearer to or adjacent to the epiphyseal cartilage or epiphyseal plate. The long bone has bone marrow cavity. You can see here there is a cavity containing the bone marrow, and it is covered by periosteum or the covering of bone or the shelf of bone is called periosteum here. The second type or the second shape is called short bone. Short bone as in the carpal and the tarsal, carpal and the tarsal, carpal in bone of the hand, tarsal bone of the foot. Okay, this bone is more or less cuboidal in shape, and is composed of cancellous or spongy bone surrounded by layer of compact bone. Thus, if I look to the section of this short bone, it is formed of spongy bone or cancellous bone surrounded by thin layer of compact bone. The third type is called flat bone. Flat bone can be found in the vault of the skull, skull cap, and the scapula, flat. What is the structure of flat bone? Composed of thin inner and the outer layers of compact bone separated by layer of spongy or cancellous bone. Here, outer layer of compact, inner layer of compact, and the middle layer of spongy or cancellous. Number 4, the irregular bone. What are the irregular bone? They are any bone not assigned to the previous groups. It is not long, it is not short, it is not flat. Thus, I said it irregular. يعني الغير منتظمة الشكل. irregular bone أو غير منتظمة الشكل. Okay, like vertebrae, like base of the skull, like pelvic bone or hip bone. Okay, all these are irregular bones. Okay, they are composed of thin shell of compact bone with the interior made up of cancellous bone. Okay, if I make cut section in the body of the vertebra, I can see it is formed of, on the outer surface there is a thin layer of compact bone, but in the interior there is a cancellous or spongy bone. Okay, here in the outer layer of any part of it there is a thin layer of compact bone, but the interior there is a spongy bone. The last shape is the sesamoid bone. Sesamoid bone are small nodules of bone found in certain tendons. Okay, the largest sesamoid bone in the body is the patella. Patella or kneecap. It is located in the tendon of quadriceps femoris. Here is the patella in the quadriceps tendon. What's the function of this sesamoid bone? Number 1, reduce friction at the tendon with the bone. Reduce friction of the tendon with the bone. Number 2, alter the direction of pull of the tendon. Change the direction of pull of the tendon. Sesamoid bone. Now let us see the surface marking of bone. On the surface of each bone, I can see some landmarks, maybe elevations on the surface of the bone or depressions on the surface of the bone, or opening or perforation. Number one, elevations, maybe linear elevation. It is called line or ridge or crest. Here, like here, this is line and this is line, and also rounded elevation may be called tubercle or tuberosity or trochanter or protuberance. This is trochanter. This is a trochanter. This is protuberance. Trochanter, protuberance. Maybe sharp elevation. If it is sharp, maybe spine or styloid process. This is a styloid process. Number 4, expanded articular end. It is called head or condyle. Articular end may be small and flat, and it is called facet. Facet. Depression may be notch at the border of the bone. It is called the notch. Maybe fossa, wide depression, or groove. Opening. I can see opening in the bone, like fissure separating two bones. Maybe foramen, like this and this, or canal inside the bone. All these are surface marking, and we will discuss it in details in lab. Bone marrow. What is the bone marrow? At birth, the bone marrow inside the bone, inside the cancellous bone, inside in the tubular shaft of long bone. At birth, all the bone marrow of the body is red for formation of the blood, hematopoietic. Okay, but with age, the red bone marrow is replaced by yellow marrow by entrance of fat cells inside it. At the age of 7, yellow marrow begin to appear in the distal bones of limb, But in the adult, all the bones become yellow except or become red bone marrow become restricted to number 1, skull, number 2, vertebral column, number 3, thoracic cage and girdle, number 4, the head of humerus and femur. But all the other bones of limbs contain yellow bone marrow. Periosteum. Periosteum or the covering of bone. Okay, it is a thick layer of fibrous tissue on the surface of bone, cover the surface of bone. Here, this is called periosteum. It has abundant vascular supply and nerve supply. It is very sensitive. Abundant vascular supply, much more blood vessels, and also nerve supply. Thus, it is very sensitive, painful. And there is bundles of collagen fibers known as Sharp's fiber connecting or extending from the periosteum to the underlying bone for fixation. Bundles of collagen fibers called Sharp's fiber. Okay. Development of bones. The bone developed by two types of ossification. Number 1, membranous ossification. Number 2, endochondral or cartilaginous. The vault of the skull or the skull cap is ossified by membranous ossification. First, it is in the form of membrane, which is transformed directly into bone. But the long bones of limbs are developed by endochondral ossification. First, there is cartilage model, which is transformed after that into bone. Let us see here in the cartilage model. First, there is primary center of ossification for the shaft, forming diaphyses. This occurs before birth, and then at birth, the bone is the baby is delivered with the bone, the shaft only, or the diaphysis is bony, but the two ends are cartilaginous. Then Secondary center of ossification appear in the two ends here, which is called a secondary center after birth, about the 3 to 5 years for the two ends or epiphyses, transforming them into bones. Now all the bone become bony here, except this line, which is epiphyseal plate of cartilage for growth of bone in length. Now let us discuss the last topic in this part of our lecture, which is called types of cartilage in the human body. We have three types of cartilage: hyaline cartilage, fibrocartilage, and elastic cartilage. Hyaline cartilage is present in epiphyseal plate for growth of long bone and also over the articular surface of synovial joints. It is characterized by it is weak, incapable of repair when fracture, and the defect is filled by fibrous tissue. لو حدث فيه أي كسر يحدث الريجنريشن بفايبرس تيشو بنسيج ليفي. This is epiphyseal plate for growth, and this is articular cartilage on the articular surface. But fibrocartilage, it is present in the disc within some joints as temporomandibular joint, الفك، مفصل الفك، sternoclavicular joint وهو المفصل في لوح الكتف بين عظمة القص والكولر بون، وني جوينت أو مفصل الركبة. يوجد أقراص غضروفية وهي من الفايبروكارتليج. or articular surface of clavicle and mandible. Also, this is fibrocartilage. If it is fractured, it repairs itself like the fibrous tissue. Here in this diagram, I can see the articular disc in the temporomandibular joint. Elastic cartilage. Elastic cartilage usually it is flexible, like the auricle of the ear, the external auditory meatus اللي القناة السمعية الخارجية, the auditory tube or Eustachian tube قناة ستاكيوس, and epiglottis وهو لسان المزمار. It repairs itself also by fibrous tissue. Thus, here this is epiphyseal plate and articular cartilage, hyaline type. Here is the disc in temporomandibular joint or articular surface of the head of mandible, this fibrocartilage, and the auricle and the Eustachian auditory meatus, elastic cartilage. Now let us see this in class exercise. Which of the following shapes of bone is composed of thin inner and outer layer of compact bone separated by layer of cancellous bone? The short bone, the irregular bone, the flat bone, or the sesamoid bone. Which of the following surface marking of human bone best describe rounded elevation? Facet, line, spine, tubercle. To which of the following groups of bone in the human body the patella is assigned? Flat, irregular, sesamoid, or short? Another questions. Which of the following bones develops by membranous ossification? Humerus, metacarpals, skull vault, tibia. The radiologist examined an X-ray of 10-year-old boy after falling on his bicycle and observed fracture in the shaft of the humerus. Which part of this bone represents the site of fracture? Epiphysis, diaphysis, metaphysis, epiphyseal plate. Which of the following cartilage is best example of elastic cartilage in the human body? Articular surface of synovial joint, auricle of ear, disc of temporomandibular joint, epiphyseal plate of long bone. Please try to answer this question and send me the answers on the WhatsApp, and then we will discuss it with each other on the group. Thank you and best wishes. We will meet in the next part of our lecture later on.